Damn it, Pikachu. Coming up on today's episode of the Salesman podcast.
CEB came out with a stat in 2015 that says the average B2B complex sale now has 5.4 buyers, right? And from our experience, that's already going up. So that means we now need to have at least 5 or 6 different personas that we need to target within each account. And then there's a different strategy to break each persona and get each persona on board.
Hello, Sales Nation. I'm Will Barron, host of the Salesman podcast, as always, and welcome to another show. On today's show, we have Brandon Redlinger, and we're talking about account-based selling. This is one of a few episodes which is coming out over the next few months on this topic. I feel like it's worth diving into quite deep because it's only going to become more and more important over the next few years, I feel, in the world of B2B. You can find out more about Brandon with his podcast, Stories from the Sales Floor. Head over to iTunes and download that there. It's well worth a listen. And if you want to learn more right now about account-based selling as well, head over to Account-Based Ebook, where Brandon's put together an ebook about the topic. It's really good. Dives in quite deep and covers it on probably more depth than what the show does today. So if you enjoy the episode, it's probably worth checking out. And with all that said, without further ado, let's jump into today's show. Hi, Brandon, and welcome to the Salesman podcast.
Hi, Will. Thanks for having me. Really excited to chat today.
You are more than welcome, sir. This is going to be part one of 2 episodes on the ideas and the concepts behind account-based selling. So I'm intrigued to get your thoughts on all of this. And I want to start this to you, having the guide that you've just written and the amount of attention you've had from that and the success with it might sound like a really stupid, daft, crazy question. And we'll come on to the guide and how everyone can get hold of it at the end of the show. But to set us up, how do you define account-based selling?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there is like account-based marketing out there these days. There's account-based sales development, but really the whole idea behind account-based is really targeting accounts rather than specific individuals, right? So it's even far as to say like you treat an account as a market of one, and then you go after that account. And these accounts generally are much higher value than your average deal size. Some people put an exact dollar amount on it, like 10x your ACV. I don't think you have to necessarily put a specific dollar on it, but it's to say that these accounts really make a big difference on your bottom line, and you got to do a lot of work on pre-qualifying them. And it's just a more strategic approach to selling rather than like persona-based or contact-based sales.
Mm-hmm. And is this something new, or is this something that I was going to say smart salespeople have been doing all along, but I guess it's industry specific as well?
Yeah, definitely not new. I think people are really finally putting a name and a label on it. You're right. A lot of this stuff has been done by more specifically field reps, but I think the new distinction these days is it's really moving towards inside sales, and they're getting their hands on it. And I think the other part of it is marketing's on board too now. So, of course, account-based marketing, that movement happened, 2 years ago, a year ago. It's still a pretty hot new topic. There are a lot of companies coming out with new technologies around targeting accounts via marketing. And then now we're seeing that shift towards sales. And what I really love and what I think is most effective is when your account-based sales and your account-based marketing approach really align. I think you really need to have that organizational alignment rather than, we all know sales and marketing fight like cats and dogs. I've been on both sides of it. I started my career in sales, did sales in New York for many years, and transitioned to the marketing side. But really our mission with the latest ebook is to really help align the two, actually, marketing, sales, and account management, customer success, whatever you want to call it, for an entire organizational alignment for the best success.
And is account-based marketing, is that literally creating content for a specific account to drive, I guess, leads and awareness in that account itself?
Yeah, exactly. And it's more through marketing channels. So you're creating specific content for a very specific account. Then you're doing targeted ad buys, you're doing retargeting, you're doing a lot of things directed specifically at one account. And then on the sales side, it's kind of doing the same thing and really aligning the two teams.
So I think you might tell me I'm wrong. I think I did this when I was in medical device sales, in that we should sit down, have a sales meeting. We'd say, well, Bradford is a local hospital to me, loads of money, some really big name surgeons there. Let's go and get. I'm always hesitant to use product names and brand names and the company names. I probably should. It was OR1 is the product, a whole operating theatre. Let's get another one in there. They already had one. So I guess that's account-based sales in that I wasn't, targeting one specific buyer, one specific, surgeon, one specific theatre manager. It was like just trying to get them all on board, get them all excited. And again, as I said, I didn't realize I was doing it at the time. I didn't realize there was a structure to it that we're going to dive into. I didn't realize it had a name, and perhaps it didn't. And what's changed then? If people, myself included, have been doing this, what's driving this new, refreshed? It's been given a name. It's cool. What's driving this push towards account-based selling?
I think a few different things. I think the first one is the technology available. That we can do so many different things now, like the sales acceleration, the sales intelligence, the whole sales space in general has really been revolutionized in the last few years with the new technologies available, right? I think sales was lagging behind a little bit. You saw marketing go through a huge change, 7, 8 years ago, and they became much more analytical, and you could do a lot more growth like engineering type things as marketing. And now we can see that in the sales space as well. So I think the technologies make it available. And then also I think there is, it's like marketing is becoming a little, like inbound marketing is becoming less and less effective. Leads, unsubscribe from lists a lot more frequently these days. Everyone's getting the same email blasts. It's just becoming a little bit less effective, and which really spurred this change in how we actually go about sales. Because sales and marketing, in the end, should be one thing, and it's really driving to close deals, right?
Definitely. Okay, so let's look from 1,000 feet down, a big picture view of all this. How or does the sales funnel and the sales process change when you're using, and can we call it, what would it be, account-based selling, ABS? Can we call it ABS rather than account-based selling? Because I'm going to be naming it wrong and getting the wrong words around by the end of the show for sure. So with ABS, how does that affect the flow, the sales process, and the funnel?
Yeah, so with ABS, some people call it ABS, the account-based sales development, but essentially, we've seen people structure their team into these, call them pods, call them like mini teams, where you have, you have one SDR, you have one AE, and then you have an account manager. For people who still have field reps, it could be one SDR, BDR, whatever it is. Then you have 2 or 3, sometimes even 4 AEs because they're in the field. They're spending a lot more time actually out doing on-site visits, and then 1 or 2 account managers. So you have a different funnel for each of these individual pods, each of these sub teams within your team. And the funnel, the top of the funnel is not as big, it's not as broad. So anyone who goes into the top of the funnel is actually already pre-qualified. So this is these accounts that we know, usually we tell people to do, set their qualification criteria very specific and do like a one sales analysis, look at all the big accounts, the top 10 accounts that they've closed, look at all the firmographic data, look at the technographic data, look at the behavioral data, and see what are the commonalities between all of these companies. And then let's match this profile, pre-qualify these accounts, and then we'll put a lot less of these accounts on the top of the funnel, and then spend more time and have a real strategic approach to move them through the funnel. Does that make sense?
That makes total sense, but I want to stop there for a second because some people might not be outside of the world of Silicon Valley tech and SaaS, and I I always have to go back and even just SaaS to define it, because I got an email ages ago of someone had listened to a show, and it, a very fair comment, but he was just going, well, why is everyone being so sassy about everything? And he assumed that it was people's personality and the way that they were selling, as opposed to software as a service, which now, of course, just means tech sales a lot of the time, rather than those words specifically. So, just so everyone's on board, what's an SDR? What's an AE? And what's the difference between perhaps a salesperson and an account manager?
Yeah, perfect. Okay, so SDR stands for Sales Development Representative. Some people have BDRs, business development, MDRs, market development representatives, but essentially it's the frontline salesperson. It's the person who, you imagine doing all the cold calling, all the cold emails, and it's basically what sales was years ago, but just broken into specializations, right? So there used to be full cycle sales reps who did everything from the lead generation to the qualifying to the demo to the close to after the close, the account managing, and customer success, the upsells, the cross sells, etc. But we've actually seen, which is part of actually this whole movement, is really specializing these roles, breaking these out and having someone who really is the very best at that one little piece of the funnel. So at the beginning of the funnel are the SDRs. We just generally just call them SDRs. Mm-hmm. I think other people may more commonly refer to them as BDRs. I don't know. But the sales development reps in the beginning doing the lead generation and the qualification, and then passing them to an AE, which is an account manager. So that person is tasked with actually, after they've been qualified, fully qualified, they do the demo, they nurture the campaign, or they nurture the account, they get that all the way to close. So, giving the contract, getting that signed, et cetera, et cetera. And then after they close, it goes to the account manager. Some people call it customer success managers, whatever it may be on your team. But everything that is after the close. So of course, after you close the deal, that like only half the work has been done, right? You want them to stick around as long as possible. Maybe it's upsell or cross-sell to a different product line in your company, et cetera.
And is there a seniority from these positions, or and where I'm going with this is, well, I guess the follow-up question is, who owns the sale? Who perhaps gets the commission? Who's the boss? Who's in charge? What's the structure?
That's a great question, actually. So another thing that we found that the teams that really do succeed have a service level agreement, an SLA, so they're all compensated, all three of those reps, or all three of those positions rather, on the same business metric. So they all have different activity metrics to help them push the account through the funnel, but in the end, they're all actually going to be compensated relatively on a very similar thing. So they're all going towards the same goal. And it may be different for different companies, but I think the bottom line is that they are all aligned. That's how they are aligned.
Yeah, I guess they have to be. Otherwise, you're just not pulling together, and it breaks the whole system at that point, I guess. And so what I'm really intrigued into, and I want to dive into deeper because I've not covered this on the show, and I feel that this could really be the crux of the whole ABS movement, is how do you, from initial contact, building those relationships, because presumably these are typically bigger, more complex deals that give you the opportunity then to expand further within the company. How does ABS differ from just the single person doing it? From the perspective of keeping the prospect engaged, is this, and what I'm getting at is, are we sharing content with them? Are we just trying to add value from other perspectives? Does it go back to just the more consultative sell? Is there a step in the process which is the consultative sell? How do we just keep the prospect engaged over this longer term buying cycle when they're dealing with multiple people?
Yeah, that's actually a great question. So yeah, one of the differences it is exactly what you're saying is you have multiple people in that account. So we all know the stat, or maybe we don't. I don't know. The CEB came out with a stat in 2015 that says the average B2B complex sale now has 5.4 buyers, right?
Mhm.
And from our experience, that's already going up. So that means we now need to have at least 5 or 6 different personas that we need to target within each account. And then there's a different strategy to, break each persona and get each persona on board. Um, so that's one big difference. And yeah, you will have CEB came out with a stat in 2015 that says the average B2B complex sale now has 5.4 buyers, right? And from our experience, that's already going up. So that means we now need to have at least 5 or 6 different personas that we need to target within each account. And then there's a different strategy to, break each persona and get each persona on board within that account, such as, mergers and acquisitions or new hiring positions, anything within that account, new blog. CEB came out with a stat in 2015 that says the average B2B complex sale now has 5.4 buyers, right? And from our experience, that's already going up. So that means we now need to have at least 5 or 6 different personas that we need to target within each account. And then there's a different strategy to, break each persona and get each persona on board. Really a lot more complex of a sale. Because before, if a lead came inbound and you were already prospecting that account, there was no way to already, like, there were a few ways, but it was really manual. It was a longer process to figure out, have we already been in touch with someone at this account? And a lot of times stuff like that gets missed. So then you have a different person calling that account, and then you have multiple people from your team talking to multiple people at that account, and it just becomes a whole big mess.
Mhm.
And that can ruin a sale in itself. And then you can have people within your own organization fighting over that sale. So with the technology and with the specialization of roles, you do get everyone more aligned, and it's a better experience ultimately for them and for you.
Would I be right in saying then that the days of the salesperson who's the hero, at least in our little bubble, outside of sales, no one cares. But in our little bubble, we're the hero. We go in, we win the business, we close the deal. We look after that customer for the longer term. Of course, you probably had about 5 jobs, and you've changed roles 5 times in the past 10 years. So you've not really looked after them because you've ditched them as you move to the next one, which isn't
Yeah.
great. Is the days of that over, and are we moving towards the days of, rather than a perhaps human to business sale where the one human is dealing with multiple decision makers and making everything right, we're moving to a world of a full business is aligned to sell their product to another business. We're not relying on the individuals anymore. It's the whole, because and where I'm getting at is the people you just named, by the time you include SDRs, account manager, someone to look after the account afterwards, marketing, if you bring subject matter experts in, so say like there's, say you're saying a CRM, so you're bringing a CRM expert in, of course, you're going to bring a finance expert in or your
Yep.
CFO to speak to their CFO. At
Yep.
this point, it's the whole company that's selling. I don't know who I've left out of there, other than admin perhaps, or HR aren't involved. Are we moving to a point where everyone is involved other than HR?
Yeah, I do think so because um like even your engineers, even your product team needs to know exactly what they're building, and more importantly, why they're building it, right? So for the younger tech companies like us in Silicon Valley, like our products are evolving so much every day, and if we want to bring the most value to that account, and basically to the market, we need our product team who are actually building the product to know exactly what they're building and why they're building it. So we even actually have some of our, like our CTO gets on the phone and talks with not only prospects but also users because he really wants to understand exactly what they're using this one specific thing for, right? Should the button be over here? Should it be over here? What should the help text be? So I do see it as, yeah, businesses selling to other businesses these days. I think that's at least the successful companies out there are really moving towards that.
And is there a size limit on this from the perspective of, your CTO, props, the size of your company has the time and it's worth him to speak to potential customers? If you went to, the CTO of Microsoft or, someone like that.
Very true. Yeah.
Of course, they've not got the time to, and the multiple divisions, and obviously it gets narrowed down. It's not physically possible. They're so high up and they're doing such high level stuff that it wouldn't make sense for them. So is there a point in a business and a company's size where this becomes perhaps less effective? And where do you think that point is?
Yeah, I do think so. And I think maybe, the point really is the person who's leading that project or leading whatever, feature is being built. Because, it could be just like one small little thing. But again, it's so important. Like the user experience plays a big role in how successful your company actually is, right? So if your sales team and marketing team are the best teams out there and they can close deals, but if you have a shitty project or a shitty product, that's not going to help, right? Mm-hmm. So, maybe it's not the CTO or maybe even a project manager that's leading something, but I do really believe that the product team should still be involved, and that's me. I'm a pretty, and our company in general, we are a pretty product centric company.
And how do you see, last question on this before we jump into a few questions to ask everyone that comes on the show, but how do you see this changing over the next 18 months to 2 years? Because this is clearly gathering steam. The sales consultants that I've had on the show to talk about very similar topics are pushing, very vocally pushing this onto the people that they're consulting for and the companies as the future. And very specifically, this split from SDR to account manager, these separations of roles are something that they're heavily promoting. Because I think outside of the world of Silicon Valley, it's perhaps not as ubiquitous. There's going to be a good percentage of people listening to the show now who aren't in this role whatsoever. And my medical device role, I had a trainee working with me. I had a logistics guy to help move around the camera kit. I was the not a line manager to either of them, but I was in control of their diaries from that perspective. So in the medical device world, this is starting to happen already. But where do you see this happening? Where do you see this changing, or how do you see this changing over the next 2 years across the whole of the sales industry?
Yeah, so I really do think everyone else, outside of Silicon Valley and outside of, Silicon Alley, Silicon Slopes, Silicon whatever you have, right? I do see more people adopting this. And because, again, we kind of already saw it with marketing. Now people in the Midwest have pretty advanced marketing teams, and they can be pretty analytical with their marketing, even though they're not considered generally a pretty tech-savvy crowd or whatever, right? So I
just offended a lot of people there.
I know. I was like, oh, I shouldn't have said. But you know what I mean, right? So I think people are going to be catching up, and catching up technology-wise. But I also do think that will lead to some of the companies that maybe haven't specialized in roles yet start to begin to think about specializing in roles. And I think it's going to be happening quicker than we think. And I also think that some technology companies out there will begin to merge. The landscape out there is going to be changing a lot from a company perspective as well. So really excited to see what is going to happen in the next year, 18 months in the sales space.
And last one on this, and a selfish one for the audience, because I know people will be thinking this right now as they listen to this, thinking that the little bubble of secure sales role that they've had for 5 years is going to get turned and tilted and threw or back on its head. Out of the roles, and I could probably make a guess at this, but SDR, account manager, subject matter experts, which of these, and if there's any I've missed as well, which of these are likely to have the best commissions and the best pay from that, to be totally blunt and one-dimensional about it, which of these is the best role financially for the audience listening now to perhaps be aiming towards?
That's a great question. So I think it is, and it historically has been the AEs, the account executives, and I do see though some people, some of the really savvy companies out there. I just realized earlier in the show I said AE stands for account manager. It's account executive. But anyway, I think the account executives get paid the most, but a lot of this role out there, if you talk to some of the leading experts like Lars Nilsson over at Cloudera, he was a big, father in this movement. He's putting a lot of this on the SDR, right? He calls the SDR the quarterback of this entire movement. And they have so much influence on the success of account-based sales development. And I think we're going to start seeing SDRs being compensated a lot more generously because that companies will realize their pivotal role in this account-based approach.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. And I guess it comes down to the fact that most people, I would almost hesitantly say every salesperson, loves closing, but they hate that initial outreach, the prospecting. And so, yeah, even though you can argue it different ways of which one has more skill, which has the personality type that would suit which needs more experience, and which is using tools versus the personal experience. But you've got to pay on results, I guess. And if you don't have the people coming in the top of the funnel, they're not going to be dropping out the other end of it. And with that, Brandon, I've got a couple of questions. I know you listen to the show, so you might have some ideas and thoughts on these. But first one, who is the world's greatest salesperson?
Oh man, this is one that I knew you were gonna ask, and it's like I'm gonna give you a different answer than everyone generally gives out there, because I mean it's hard to argue with going with a cliche answer like Steve Jobs, right?
If you say Steve Jobs, Donald Trump, they're the main two at the moment, then the interview's over. We're done.
Obama, yeah, exactly. The show's not airing.
Yeah,
no, I'm just kidding. So I was actually just at a Modern Sales Pros event the other night, and I was talking to a lot of other founders, specifically selling founders of companies, of tech companies here in the Bay Area and the Silicon Valley. And what I began to notice is we were talking about hiring salespeople, hiring really effective salespeople. And it was hard for a lot of them to find the first few sales reps, or at least keep a lot of them around. There was a higher turnover. And one thing that they kept saying is like, I can't find anyone who can sell as good as me. So I think like the best salespeople out there are like the founding salespeople in the company, right? The founder, that is the first salesperson. Because at PersistIQ, like Puyan, by far our best salesperson, because he's so passionate about it. Yeah. He's so close to the problem. He's so committed to helping people overcome these challenges. And I think it's that person with those characteristics, right? The vision, because Steve Jobs, right? The ultimate visionary. I see Puyan as our Steve Jobs for the company. Mm-hmm. So I hope that's at least a good answer.
That's a brilliant answer. That's the best answer I've ever had. That's the best answer I've ever had this year for sure. And I was going to ask you why, and you dove into it then, but this passion is something that I see in super successful salespeople, and I think it's part of your sales DNA. You either have it or you don't, and you can get yourself riled up and passionate. I am in the world of business. I'm super passionate about my baby, which is the podcast and Salesman.red, but I've never been that passionate about the products that I've sold. I've always had to kind of hack it and rewire my brain that I'm not particularly passionate about endoscopes going inside people, but I am passionate about the difference that makes to a certain extent, but then the holiday that's going to buy me when everyone is happy and I've got a long-term customer on board, and then I just have to pop in and see them every now and again and do the account-based selling, as opposed to having to then go out prospect and do loads of new business. And I don't know if there's a fact, I assume it is, that passion, and you'll see this in your company, or you'll be able to give me an insight to it, does passion then drop each level? You go down the different positions, starting from a founder, then to, first few employees, then as you spread out, does passion like dissipate slightly as you go down that tree?
Yeah, that's a good question. Not sure there's like a direct correlation. Well, there might be a direct correlation, but I don't think it has to be that way. I think, yeah, another reason, Puyan is so good at what he does is like he's so committed to the end result, right? So not necessarily that like we have to have the best software, but it's like helping reps be more effective, whatever that means, however we can achieve that goal. He is so committed to that. Whereas I think, some of the people who are just as passionate about maybe aren't as committed that deeply to the end result. You know what I
Mm.
mean?
I like it. That's a really good differentiation. I appreciate that. Okay, next one. What is one book or resource other than the ebook, which we're going to talk about in a second, that you'd recommend to the Salesman podcast audience?
One of my favorite books out there is called Breakthrough Advertising by Eugene Schwartz. It's an older book. It's a really thick book. Might be a little harder to find. It's expensive on Amazon, but it's totally worth it. It really gets into the psychology of people, and I think that's what ultimately sales and marketing is about. Is like the psychology of buying, and I think there are so many implications that book has on salespeople, right? So it's generally thought of as a marketing and advertising book. It has advertising in the title, but I think a lot of salespeople would really benefit from breakthrough advertising.
Definitely. And something I'd recommend on this, I think it's called Scientific Advertising. You probably know the books better than I do, but that's as a thin book. And I got a lot of value out of that from a sales perspective of how to position yourself within the mini market of your direct competition and things of that nature. And I'll link to both of them in the show notes over at salesman.red. And final one, and have you prepared an answer for this final question?
Not well, it depends what it is, but maybe.
Okay, I'll ask you then because I've been changing it up. But if you prepared for it, then somewhat. Then I'll ask it anyway. If you could go back in time and speak to your younger self, what would be the one piece of advice you'd give him to help him become better at sales?
Yeah, so I really haven't prepared anything for this one. I have a lot of different ideas because I think it's something that it's something that I ask a lot of my guests on our podcast. And God, there's so many things that I would love to go back and tell myself in sales. I think the one piece of advice that I think I would just give myself is like let go of your ego, right? Let ego get out of your way. I think that really gets in the way of a lot of people just asking right questions. They don't want to sound stupid, whether it be to a prospect or to your manager or to whoever it is. I think ego just really gets in the way of us succeeding a lot of the times. So I think that'd be the main piece of advice I would give.
Amazing stuff. And you don't seem like someone who has a huge bulging, head can't fit through door because their ego is so big, like persona. Is this something that you've changed and developed over time and you're more egocentric when you were younger? Or do you think it's just, everyone has an ego and everyone could perhaps do with batting it down just a little bit?
I think everyone can dial it down a little bit. So this is actually interesting. So maybe outwardly I don't have a big ego, but inside I think I have a really healthy ego, and like I really believe that I can do anything that I fucking want to do. Like I honestly believe that if someone challenges me to anything, I will not lose. Like I will. Any expense I will go to win, So maybe there's a little bit of difference there, but outwardly letting your ego go, but still inwardly having that inner strength and belief in yourself.
Nice. Well, with that, Brandon, I want you to tell us a little bit about your new ebook, Bridging the Gap. I want you to tell us where we can find it, and then after that, I want you to share your podcast with us as well, because I know a lot of Sales Nation will be interested in checking that out.
Yeah, absolutely. So the ebook is called Bridging the Gap, the Ultimate Guide to Aligning Sales and Marketing for Success. And you can find it at accountbasedebook.com. And we really dive into a lot of what we were talking about. So not just the what, but the how. How do you actually go about aligning your team? How should you actually route inbound leads? What does a service level agreement look like that your team should be on? So a lot of that is all in that ebook. And if you have any specific questions for me afterwards, or if you're building that process out yourself and want some guidance, it's just Brandon at PersistIQ. More than happy to answer any questions for you guys out there.
Amazing. And pictures your podcast as well. I think that's really relevant for our audience.
Yes, absolutely. So our podcast is about to launch on iTunes. It's called Stories from the Sales Floor, and it's just salesfloorstories.com. And what we're doing, rather than just interviewing people and getting asking questions like this, although this is definitely highly valuable to people, we took a different approach. We took a storytelling approach. So we're asking people like, what's the most embarrassing moment that you've ever had in sales, and what did you learn from it? Or what's the biggest deal you have ever closed? How did you go about closing that deal? And getting these stories, and then the learnings behind them. And then each episode is actually based on that one question, and we'll have multiple experts answering that single question on that episode. So again, salesfloorstories.com.
Nice. So, Brandon, with all that, mate, I appreciate your time. There's going to be a follow-up show with, there'll probably be a couple of follow-up shows, I'm sure, because this is a topic that can get it. I feel like we can go a lot deeper into it. I'm happy to go deeper into it because it's clearly a lot of sales is moving towards this, so it's going to become even more relevant, and content-wise, it's going to become even more useful for the audience moving forward. So with that, I'll definitely have you back on to dive into it in more detail, and I want to thank you for your time, and I want to thank you for joining us on the Salesman podcast.
Had a lot of fun. Thanks a lot, Will. I'll talk to you soon.
And there we have it. Thank you, Brandon, for coming on the show. I appreciate your time and your expertise on this, mate. And Sales Nation, if you haven't already, it's well worth checking out yesterday's show with Mark, where we dive into the psychology behind getting and converting someone from a no to a yes. So with all that said, I'll speak with you all again tomorrow.